Hello, and welcome to the Art Lounge Alley, everyone. This is Figure Drawing Basics Part 84. I am your host, and I'm gonna start the stream. This is where we left off last week. I am gonna try to do a quick overview of some of the things that we did last week. Just to I think it's good to just review, to refresh your memory, to remember exactly what was covered. And a lot of it had to do with light source. So I'm just gonna flip over to that. This is it right here. There were several examples of this, using all of this bust right here. This is a light source coming directly onto the face. So as you could see what's affected, what is in shadows underneath the nose and around the chin. This is an example of the face getting light source directly onto the left or the right side, and how the face turns out in terms of shadows. So as you could see, there are only certain things that are protruding out and are receiving a lot of light, while everything else that's a little bit below that is in shadow on this example. If you guys want to catch up through the other streams where I go in depth about each and every single one of these, you could head over to the video section in the Twitch channel and filter it based on collections. And in the collections, you'll see a folder for each stream. You could click on that. You could go back as far as the first episode, all the way up until this one today. And I go into more examples. I show you guys based on the bust to demonstrate how pretty much, despite the face being different from this one, the way the shadows are formed, the way the lights, the highlights are formed, are pretty much the same. So it's this like fundamental principle that comes to when it comes to the face. and a light source and how that affects the face features. But yeah, just to go over quickly, this is a light source that is coming from the corner right. So it's not directly towards the right, but it's a little bit over the face, and it's kind of similar to this one, but the transition, as you could see, from highlights into shadows is more gradual, whereas here it's very extreme, considering that the light source is very close to the face, whereas this is a little bit more, I guess, more of a natural light source, where it's at a distance, so that way more parts of the face are actually illuminated and it's not as high of a contrast. In this example, it is the face getting the light source over the top of the face, and it is an extreme form, so it's a light source that's closer. So something like, let's say, headlights or spotlights, I would say would have this kind of effect on the face, where the bottom part of the face is in shadow while the top part is getting a lot of light. It's another form of light source that's pretty close to the face as opposed to at a distance. Whenever the light source is at a distance, there's more space for it to actually hit, whereas when it gets closer towards the face, it tends to like narrow. It's a similar way as like flashlight, right? If you hold up a flashlight up until a surface, if you bring it really close, the circumference is pretty small, but the further you pull it away, the more you're able to see using the flashlight. So it's kind of the same idea as here, you know, because the light source is closer towards the face, it's affecting the top part, not as much as the bottom. And you could see in this example how it transitions from highlights into shadows. It's a lot more extreme. In this example, it's the reverse of this. So rather than the light source being from the top down, it's from the bottom up. So everything you would see here that's in shadow in this example or in this light source, it will be in highlight form. So underneath the nose, it's in shadow in that light source. Underneath this, the nose, in this light source, it's highlights. Same thing for the eye sockets. As you can see, it's in shadows. Here it's in highlight. The bottom of the chin is getting highlights or a lot of light, whereas here it's in shadow. The upper lip in this example is in shadow, whereas in this one it's receiving a lot of light. And it's reversed, so the bottom lip is now in shadow, as opposed to how you see it here, the bottom lip is receiving light. So take your time and study these, at your own pace. If you guys would like to have this uploaded to the Patreon page, leave a comment. I will scan this in, and that way you guys can study it. You could take a look and see for yourself. But I do encourage you guys to try and either purchase a bust or venture into clay. It really helps to transition into your drawing. It allows you to maneuver the skull or the face in any direction that you want it to be, and you can move the light source in any direction that you want it to be, and you could study it according to that. So really it's at your disposal, whereas with these photos it's kind of restricted. You can't move it around. It's only the front view perspective when it comes to the light source, when it comes to the face. Whereas with this, you could change it around to pretty much any perspective. You could move the head in any direction. You could move the light source in any direction. So you really do take a lot away from constructing a face or having a bust around to be able to play around with. And it really helps you understand the face more. You spend more time trying to make sure that things are even, that things are actually lining up and they make sense. And through that process, it helps you when you're drawing, because you still remember all those things. Like when it comes down to the mouth and the relationship between the mouth and the nose, understanding that distance, like you get a better hands-on sort of experience with it, and it commits itself to memory a lot better having to actually study from clay. And whatever you could do to give yourself a better image in your mind's eye of the face, of the body, the better it is. You could continue to practice, of course, and draw, but three-dimensional sculpting allows you to understand the features three-dimensionally in your mind's eye. You're creating this visual understanding of it that eventually becomes second nature. It's kind of like the same concept as the alphabet. When you first started out, it was this kind of very, I want to say, divided experience between you and what you're learning. It was you studying the alphabet, whereas now it's ingrained into your head and you don't even think about it, right? It's become part of you. You don't recite it in your mind every time you sit down to read. It just happens. So you're basically doing the same thing with the figure, with the human anatomy, with face features and stuff. Like right now you feel very separate from it because you're in the learning process. But once you practice it, once you keep on trying as best as you can to understand it, the same way you did with the alphabet, it commits itself to memory and it becomes less of this technical sort of process that you're witnessing right now. But the most important thing is that you're constantly pushing yourself to learn, to understand things, and practicing. You don't want it to fade. The more time you give between the times that you sat down to study, between the times that you sat down to practice, the more it fades away. But if you continuously do it day after day after day, think of it as like layering. You're layering, or like the watercolor process. When you do the first layer, it's light. Second layer, it gets darker, 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 until eventually it's very crisp. So it's the same concept when it comes to the learning process. And I want to say in pretty much a lot of the things I could think of. But speaking specifically about drawing, it's that same idea. You layer your understanding day after day after day, and you give it less time to fade. Whereas if you take big breaks, it fades away, and then you have to start with that same layer where it's very light understanding, and then again you spend 3-4 days not practicing, and that layer fades away, and then you have to sit down and do it again. So consistency really, really excels your work, excels your understanding and your ability, not just understanding, but your hand-eye coordination, your muscle flexibility, being able to draw various kinds of lines and syncing what you see with what your hand is going to do. Your eye sees something and it tells your hand, I want you to draw this exact line. I want you to draw this in this direction. And your hand is able to do that because they're so well connected and your hand is flexible enough to do it. I want to say it's very similar to exercising as well, right? If you right away jump to doing the most strenuous exercise, you might injure yourself. But if you warm up and you make your body more flexible, if you make your muscles more flexible, it's less likely, and you could do more with that warm up, with that startup. So it's the same concept here. You want to get yourself flexible enough so that when you tackle more complicated things, your hand-eye coordination really could deal with that. It could really go along with it. So going back to this, this was just to, I guess, review the whole process, from start to finish, what you start out with a very basic shape, and then working your way up to more detail. So I'm going to continue on with that. I'm going to try to continue on with this drawing, and then jump into a new one with the same step-by-step process that I'll be taking you guys through. And for those of you who are curious about the special stream, well, it's gonna be this, what's today? Today is Monday, so then special stream is gonna be on Thursday at 9 p.m. I'm just going to continue on from where I left off before, which was talking about all the influences, all different influences of Gil Elvgren, what really pushed him to become like one of the best pinup artists around. I mean, I still look at it and I consider it to be one of the best drawings, illustrations, composition, and just such a solid understanding of the female figure. Like, beautiful work. But it's also cool just to see like what other artists of that time and, you know, what their work was like. What do they focus on? I really enjoyed that. And there's a couple more to go. Like, this is the first part, and the further we go into his story, the more artists are gonna come out, and you're gonna see like what their styles were like. So make sure you tune back in Thursday at 9 p.m. for the second half of the special stream about Gil Elvgren. Hope you guys had a good weekend. I just spent more time doing work on my side project, as well as the project that I stream on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays. I'm trying to get it to the next stage of coloring. It's getting a lot closer, and I'm pretty excited to show you guys tomorrow what the progress of it has been. And I'm also pretty thrilled about starting a new project. I have a couple of ideas. Part of me wants to just continue on with the character development for what you guys have been seeing recently. But another one, I just recently stumbled across a screenshot from Grimm. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that show, but it's on Amazon, and it's like based on the stories by the Grimm Tales. Like, it's just a bunch of old school, I want to say it's like folk tales. But the show is just like combining, I want to say like CSI with the Brothers Grimm. So it's pretty interesting, actually, and I kind of got addicted to it at some point because I just like that combination. I grew up on reading tales from Brothers Grimm. It's been a while, actually, since I saw that show, but I stumbled across this screenshot that I took of the characters, and when they morph into whoever it is that they're really underneath. It's a pretty interesting concept, or the tale is really interesting. How the characters develop is pretty cool as well. And I really liked how one of them looked, so I took a screenshot of it and I had it like buried somewhere, and like all these references, because I take a lot of screenshots of things that I like. Man, hold on. like Pretzel knows that I'm streaming, so they're like, let's play that really annoying intro. But yeah, I spend a lot of time just like taking screenshots of things that I like for references, for things to work off of, to have like some sort of inspiration or whatnot. And for cases like that, you know, when I'm like browsing through them and saying like, oh, this is pretty cool, I should try to do this, or try to work off of this. Or at some point, you know, it's like I want to say it's like a bookmark for ideas sometimes. So like if I come up with the concept or something, but while looking at an image, I take a screenshot of it so that when I revisit that image, I'm like, oh yeah, there's this concept, this idea that I wanted to execute, or this idea that I wanted to create, which has proven itself to be useful. So the other day I was just like browsing through all that, then I came across that and I was like, oh, that would be perfect actually. And this drawing that I'm working on right now, it's actually a perfect example of a light source that I was going over. And if you guys can guess it, for those of you who are just tuning in for the first time, and the light source is coming from the top right. It's important to identify, I think, prior to jumping into drawing, it's important to identify where your light source is going to be. So you could start out with like a sketch of something, like, you know, just a quick light draft of it without any detail, and then establish your light source at that point. And that way it's just going to save you a lot of time having to wrestle with it or create shadows at odd places. I think one of the most important things when it comes to light source is consistency. So making sure that the entire face, the light source applies to all parts of the face, all parts of the body as well. So once you do that, you kind of take the burden away of having to like figure that out as you go. You already know, okay, the light source is going to be from the top right, or it's going to be directly onto the face, or it's the top left. And then you can have just like a little indication of it to remind you of that. And then based off of that, you can start constructing shadows. So in this example, since it's top right, as I mentioned before, the shadows form on the opposite side of the light source. So if it's the top left, then shadows are going to be on the right side. So I'm gonna spend a little more time on this and then I'm going to move on to the next example, just to show you guys a fresh start, because this is just a continuation from last week. And I could just like endlessly continue on with adding little bits of detail here and there. I'd rather show you guys something new. All right, I'm gonna say that's good enough. We could spend more time on it off stream. So I'm gonna start out. Maybe I should start out over here. So, as always, start out with the circle. And then from there, depending on the angle, which is going to be a 3/4 view, I'm going to add the cup shape in the chin area. So since it's 3/4 view, the guiding line that splits the face down the middle is going to be also a 3/4 view as well. Then we got the first guideline, which is going to be the line for the brows and where the ear is going to be. And then I'm going to do one that's right below it for the eyes. I think that's a really important one as well. And for the nose. So it's very important to do that if you're first starting out, if you're just learning, to create these guidelines, so that way you're not guesstimating. You know, you're not like, oh, maybe it's here, maybe it's there. You already know, okay, it's supposed to be within this area. And don't worry about just like intuitive drawing. That's something that's going to come to you as you solidify your understanding of the figure of the face, how certain things line up, etc. Like I mentioned before, you don't recite the alphabet every time you sit down to read anymore, right? But in the beginning, you have to do that over and over and over again until it really committed itself to your memory. So this is the same thing here. Don't worry about, oh, I'm not, drawing is supposed to be more of like an intuitive thing, and you're supposed to be able to just do things, and that's really not the point. You want to be able to just get to a place where you could sit and draw figures properly, proportions and all that stuff. So however long it takes you, it doesn't really matter as much. In comparison, when you're saying, oh, this person's quicker or so on and so forth, that's not the point. Eventually you'll get there too. It just really depends on how much time and effort you put into it. Hold on a second. I don't know why it's playing that song over and over again. But yeah, so the more you commit to it, the more it'll ingrain itself into your memory, and it will become an intuitive process. So right now I'm just putting parts of the face as placeholders. I'm not going to commit to too much detail. I just want to make sure things are in their right area in comparison to each other, in relation to each other. And then little by little, just build from there. just showing you guys like a block form of certain features on a face. It helps to just form it this way so you could see it three-dimensionally. You could understand placement better. Now, as I mentioned earlier, these are placeholders, so you could always adjust things as you go. Like, I'm putting a little bit more pressure on the pencil to make sure you guys can see the process. But usually I would draw a lot lighter than this, so that way, as I'm building or as I'm like putting in placeholders for things, they don't stick around so much if I erase them. But right now, I feel more and more confident that what I got down is pretty good, and now I'm gonna try and define features more. In other news, I am pretty happy for people in Iran protesting, you know, and in terms of how like corrupt and fascist their government is. I'm really happy that a lot of people who are pretty young as well, teenagers and early 20s as well, they're banding together and they're continuously protesting despite getting really aggressive and crazy responses, you know, from obviously the government that's trying to shape them to be obedient pawns in their society. they're not lighting up. They're still pushing. They're still making sure they're trying to change things as much as possible because they're fed up. They're fed up with the tyranny and corruption and terrible conditions that they're pushed to live under. And why? Like a lot of these people might be starting to realize, like, hey, this might be my only life. This might be the only time that I get to experience things, and yet here I am appeasing all these corrupt, crazy people who are just like making it difficult and more difficult to enjoy our existence. And I really commend them for it. And there's a lot of bravery there, and I'm looking forward to that really being the case everywhere, because I think people have been complacent for a very long time, and they've given all these corrupt politicians, corporations, so much power and so much comfort in all that. They're seeing like, oh, people aren't pushing back. We could raise the prices on things. We could make it even more and more difficult. We could penny pinch everywhere. We don't even have to do anything, even though they're electing us to do, to take care of the economy, to make things better. Like, we can get away with doing this, that, and the other. It doesn't. And what are they going to do? That's kind of the attitude that a lot of these like politicians and corporations are at. And I think personally, I believe that is the biggest reason for inflation. Of course they're going to come up and they're going to tell you, oh, it's this, it's the war, or it's blah blah blah. They're never ever, and I think that's something that people have to understand and accept, they will never ever tell you the truth. Never. It'll compromise their position. And if it's greed we're talking about here, if it's people who are just obsessed with making more money, they're not going to sacrifice that. By being honest, what do they gain for it? So if people don't hold them responsible, hold them accountable, and start pushing back and saying like, hey, we notice. Like, we're noticing that you're just abusing your position. And we're noticing that you don't care. Even though your job and responsibility is to care and to make our lives better. That's why we elected you. That's why we're paying taxes. We're going to kick you out. You got to get out. We're going to elect people who are actually who are going to care about the economy, or we're going to care to make our lives better, not exploit us. And that's basically what they're doing over there. They're saying, nope, no more. I don't see a reason why you should. Despite all this like a force and so on and so forth, it's the choices succumb to their force and continue to live like a terrible life where you're just like pissed off and miserable, or don't succumb to it and face that anyway, but at least you're trying to make those things better. At least you're pushing back and telling them like, hey, you can't keep going, getting worse and worse and worse, because that's where it's going to lead to. It's not like they're going to light up and say, oh, well, we've had enough money. Like, we pushed everybody to go and make more profits in a deadly disease that spread around all around the world, and they didn't push back. Well, we could do more. Like, what else can we do? We could push them to even do this, that, and the other, which is basically where a lot of things are politically. And yeah, I commend their bravery. I think in a lot of places, though, there's complacency, that people are so complacent in their position. Like, oh, well, I got internet and it's not too bad. Like, yeah, they're really like exploiting my time and they're not even paying me well for it, but I get to go home and, look at Instagram for hours or go and get drunk or something. Like, I think places that have more destitute are pushing back. And I think it's just weird that it has to be in that place in order for people to actually do something about it. It's like waiting for the very last minute where things are so bad that you can't, you have no other choice, whereas I think it's better to just not do that and stop it from getting to that point in an early stage, because it'll be a lot easier to nip it in the bud, kind of. And I think it's also the reason why we're not seeing a lot of innovation, is because all these corporations are so rich that they're just they're either buying out, harassing, blocking any form of progress, because that's going to compromise their profits. So like, I see things like where people are inventing plastic bag substitutes where they're biodegradable and they're excellent. Why isn't that a thing everywhere? Why isn't that spreading around? Why aren't more supermarkets and businesses taking on that innovation or encouraging it? And because a lot of these oil companies would end up losing business, because a lot of these oil companies are producing all this stuff. Like, think about, like, go to a supermarket and look around how much stuff is in plastic. And that's just one supermarket. And how many things are constantly being pushed into the supermarkets, just in general, like taking a look and seeing how much plastic is being used all around. Plastic bags, plastic wrap, all that stuff, that's oil. But there are innovations that are coming out that are really changing things around, changing the game. And for some reason, and the stuff that I'm talking about, I've seen years ago. I'm talking about 10 years ago or 7 years ago, to be more realistic. Still, it's not around. And I'm going to guess it's the same exact thing that happened with electric cars and General Motors back in the 60s. They were already able to produce electric cars back at that time. And they were even doing an expo where they were demonstrating, like, this is how it's going to work. It's solar powered, it blah, 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 blah. And of course, General Motors shut it down because it's going to be in the way of their profits. So unless people actually start pushing back against these corporations and telling them, like, you know what, fuck off. Like, we don't want you around anymore. You're corrupting a lot of things. You're making things worse. You're stagnating any progress, any form of innovation or anything interesting to come about, because all you care about is money and your own crappy business that's like exploiting and ruining everything around. Like, I think people really have to, like, instead of waiting for the last minute where things are so disastrous, like in the pandemic, where basically people were just like, hey, what the hell is going on? Are we all just going to die? And, at that time, it was pretty freaky. I'm going to say, for me as well. And now that it's no longer as much of a threat, or maybe people just really became, again, complacent, and it's still going on. It's still killing a lot of people, but people are just like more accepting of it because I'm going to say, social media in general likes to make jokes about everything. Like, they use humor as a way of trying to diffuse anything, like any sort of tension. But what ends up happening is that people start taking things lightly because of that. Oh, it's funny and they're laughing about it. And if this person's laughing about it, then it's not that big of a deal. Like, it becomes that sort of thing, even though I understand that, it's sometimes the best route or something, to just, let's say, mock corruption or whatever else. But it also develops, I think, complacency because of it. And this, like, it's not a big deal sort of vibe because of that. You know, you keep people are constantly making jokes about it, making memes about it, or whatever else, but the problems don't really get addressed. It's just like a coping mechanism, kind of. Whereas the issues that people are mocking are just continuing on with just this like division, this polarity, but both sides are just like mocking each other all day. And, you know, but the ones that are still continuing to do it are the ones that are creating the problems, you know. So despite this, like, you know, the jokes that people are making and the memes and all that other stuff, they're still holding on strong with their corruption. It doesn't end there. It's not like they're just like, okay, well, I guess we should stop, guys. They're mocking us online. They're creating memes and they're creating like these really witty comebacks or whatever else. I guess we should quit it. We should stop exploiting everything and everybody, and it's not going to happen, you know. So I'm just pointing out at the fact that people in Iran are really focusing on progress. They're really trying to push things to a new level. And granted, it's better, I'm going to say it's better in the States than it is over there. I mean, people are totally oppressed over there. They have like the biggest form of dictatorship over there, because people are being like, students are being taken to what is it, like psych wards now. Like these are like teenagers and 20 something year olds who are being taken to like psych wards because these tyrants are labeling them as crazy or whatever, because no, they're pushing against their regime, they're pushing against their authoritarianism. But despite that, they're still holding strong, and I think it needs to catch wind at a lot of places. These people are really got way too used to their position, you know, and their ability to blindside society. You know, they're dangling toys in front of everybody while billions and billions of people are dying. Things are becoming more disastrous. And the only ones who are suffering are the citizens, because those people, they're flying helicopters, they're like taking jets to the grocery store or whatever. They don't care. It's never going to affect them. You know, so for people to sit and wait and hope that these officials will do something about it or things will change, forget it, man. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. People have to like take to the streets. They got to start protesting. I'm not talking about violent protesting. I'm talking about consistent, large numbers, you know, doing what basically they're doing in Iran. Like in Iran, they're blockading streets, but they're leaving enough room for one single file cars to get through, which I think is an excellent way to go about it, because they're not completely deadlocking traffic. They're just really pushing it to a crawl, and they're doing it so frequently that it's becoming a serious issue, you know, where these profiteers or these companies that are profiting off of all this are starting to take hits because of it. And I think that's very smart. That's exactly how you do it, because that's all those people care about. But I think in the States there's more protection. So you could do it, but you could, and you have protection. You have the Constitution. You could take police departments to court if they start abusing citizens, if they start like trying to disperse protests. You know, you could be like, hey, that's my First Amendment right. You're violating it. Your entire department is going to be sued for it. Like, you guys are violating the First Amendment right. Not only that, but you're also being violent, which is the opposite of what your job responsibility is when it comes to protesting. Like, it is in law that, you know, police officers are supposed to protect protesters, not attack them. So when you're seeing that, that's automatically a flag right there. Like, hey, your department is going to be under fire. You guys are violating all these rights. And also, streets are government property. They're not private property. So, and the First Amendment right says that if you protest, you have the right to do it on government property. As long as it's government property, you are protected under law. And, like traffic, all that stuff, or roads, that's public. That's government property. Government property is, we paid for it with our taxes for that to be constructed. So, I think, again, in the States, there's a lot more protection. And despite that, people in Iran, even though they have this like tyrannical government, tyrannical scenario, and them getting not as much protection as people do in the States, they're still doing it. They're still pushing that, which I think is great. All the luck and power to them. And hopefully they could set more and more examples and really ignite fires for people to really want to initiate change. Stop giving these crazy people free reign over our lives and our freedoms. Going back to it's my political rant for the day. Going back to this, let me just make sure I'm not going overtime. Well, I might be, actually. Well, ladies and gents, I'm gonna have to cut the stream here. I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was just the beginning to more of a finished product, as you guys saw how important it is to construct everything, to sketch things out first, create these guidelines to make sure that things are lining up. As you saw, that's pretty important when it comes to the eyes, when it comes to the mouth, and just in general, like making sure everything is following the same direction. Just as similar as we talked about consistency when it comes to shadows forming depending on the light source. It's the same idea when it comes to consistency with face features and perspective. So in 3/4 view, to make sure everything is in place based on these guidelines for a 3/4 view. We're going to be doing another demonstration tomorrow, and then moving on to another concept. Also is going to be very similar, going from start to finish to more of a finished product as well. But just a new idea, kind of, and I think it'll be pretty interesting. But yeah, tomorrow I'm going to be doing one more example that's similar to this. You guys will see the whole beginning to end process for it as well. If you guys enjoyed this content, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. They're both greatly appreciated and they help the stream grow. So I'm going to take that 5-minute break, and I will be back for drawing comics. Excited about that. Going to be learning from John Buscema's amazing work, and I'll show you guys that more in just a few minutes. So stick around, y'all. I'll see you in 5.